I was stirring soup in my son's kitchen when my daughter-in-law smashed a metal ladle against my head. Hot soup spilled over me as she screamed that I was useless and didn't belong in her house. From the living room, my son heard everything but he didn't move. Instead, the TV volume went up. I fell to the floor, bleeding, realizing at that moment that I meant nothing to him anymore. Before we begin, a huge thank you to all of you. We've officially hit 500 subscribers. It's a small milestone, but a big deal for us. Now we're aiming for 1,000 subscribers, and your support truly keeps this channel alive. Please like this video, subscribe so you never miss a story, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and how you're doing today. Your love and encouragement mean more than you know. Now, let's jump into the story. The ladle hit my head so hard I saw stars. "What kind of woman cooks like this?" Dawn screamed, her voice sharp and cruel. "Are you trying to poison us, you useless old woman?" Hot metal pressed against my temple. Soup splashed onto my hair and neck. I grabbed the counter to keep from falling. From the living room, the television volume suddenly went up. My son, Robert, had heard everything, and he chose not to come. That silence hurt more than the blow. 5 minutes later, the kitchen exploded, pots crashing, plates shattering, my body hitting the floor. When Robert finally appeared, he stood frozen in the doorway. "Mom, what did you do?" he whispered, staring at me like I was the problem. What neither of them knew was this: I still had one final card to play. My name is Helen. I'm 71 years old. With hands worn by decades of cooking, cleaning, and caring for others. Until recently, I believed family loyalty was unbreakable. I was wrong. 6 months earlier, I buried my husband, Henry. 50 years of marriage ended quietly one afternoon when his heart gave out while watering flowers in our backyard. I found him there, the hose still running, his shoes soaked. After that day, my house felt too big, too quiet. Robert insisted I move in with him and his wife. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom. It's not safe," he said. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I packed my life into 4 suitcases and left the home where I raised my son, where my husband and I once danced in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. From the first moment I arrived, I knew I had made a mistake. Dawn greeted me with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. "Welcome, Helen," she said. Not Mom, not mother-in-law. Just Helen, as if I were a stranger renting space in her house. I moved into a small guest room at the end of the hallway. One narrow window. One dim light. I hung Henry's photos and tried to make myself invisible. That became my role. Every morning, I woke at 6. I made breakfast, cleaned, folded laundry, cooked meals no one appreciated. Dawn criticized everything. Robert watched and said nothing. At night, I cried silently, afraid that if I complained, I'd be sent away. And then came the soup, the ladle, the silence. The moment I realized I meant nothing to the people I had given my entire life to. But what happened next is something neither of them ever expected. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. Instead, I made a decision, one that would cost my son everything he thought he owned, and reveal a truth that would turn his world upside down. I didn't plan what I did next. It wasn't rage, was survival. My hands were shaking as I looked around the kitchen. I had cleaned every single day for months. The stove, the counters, the dishes Dawn claimed were hers. Something inside me finally snapped. I grabbed the pot of soup she had mocked and dumped it into the sink. Then another pot. Plates slipped from my hands and shattered against the floor. Cups broke. Silverware clattered everywhere. The sound was loud, chaotic, but for the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. Robert came running. He stopped in the doorway, eyes wide, staring at the mess like I was the disaster. "Mom, what did you do?" he asked quietly. I touched my temple. My fingers came back red. "She hit me," I said. with a boiling ladle. And you heard it. He hesitated. I didn't hear anything like that. The lie hung between us. Dawn rushed in behind him, furious. She's lost her mind. Look at this kitchen. Robert, I can't live like this anymore. Then she said the words that changed everything. It's her or me. The house went silent. I looked at my son, searching his face for the boy I raised, the boy who once cried if I scraped my knee. For a moment, I thought he might choose me. He didn't. I think it's better if you leave, Mom, he said, staring at the floor. This isn't working. I felt my heart drop. You're asking me to leave, I whispered. After she hit me. It's not like that, he replied quickly. You need independence. Space. This will be better for everyone. Better. That night, I packed my 4 suitcases again. At dawn, a taxi waited outside. Robert stood by the door holding 2 crisp bills. $200, he said. For a hotel, I'll help you later. Later never came. I didn't hug him. I didn't argue. I took the money and left without looking back. The taxi dropped me at a cheap roadside motel on the edge of the city. Flickering neon lights. Stained carpets. The room smelled damp and old. $30 a night. I did the math. I had less than a week. That night, I sat on the creaking bed and cried, not quietly this time. I cried for my husband, for my lost home. For the son who chose comfort over his own mother. Days blurred together. I ate from vending machines. I sent Robert messages. He never replied. When the money ran out, the motel manager knocked. I'm sorry, ma'am. You need to check out. So I dragged my suitcases into the street. With nowhere to go. That night, I slept on a park bench, believing I had lost everything. But inside one forgotten envelope, a truth waited. One that would soon make my son beg at a door he never thought was mine. Sleeping on a park bench changes you. That first night, I didn't really sleep. I sat upright, clutching my purse, jumping at every sound. Sirens wailed in the distance. A cold wind cut through my sweater. I kept thinking about Robert, about him lying in a warm bed while his mother stared at the sky. By morning, my body ached in places I didn't know could hurt. The days became a routine I never imagined living. I searched trash bins behind bakeries for leftover bread. I lined up at a nearby church on Tuesdays and Thursdays for soup. No one looked at anyone for too long. We all carried shame in our eyes. One night, a man sleeping under cardboard handed me a piece of stale bread. Be careful out here, Grandma, he said. I thanked him and cried quietly after he walked away. Weeks blurred together. My clothes grew dirty. My hands shook from hunger. I had become invisible, someone people stepped around, not over. Then one afternoon, while digging through my suitcases for something clean, I found an old envelope. It was yellowed, worn, and had my name written on it in handwriting I knew better than my own. Henry. My heart began to pound. I sat on the bench and opened it slowly, afraid of what I might find. Inside was a letter and several folded documents. The letter began, "My dearest Helen." My hands trembled as I read. Henry had written it 2 years earlier. During a hospital stay he never talked about. He apologized for keeping things from me about money. About plans, about preparations for the future. As I unfolded the documents, my breath caught. Property deeds. Bank statements. Investment records. One address made my blood run cold. Magnolia Street. The building where Robert lived. Where I had been thrown out. I read everything again and again, my mind struggling to understand. 13 properties. Multiple investment accounts. More money than I had ever imagined. And it was all mine. I laughed and cried at the same time. Sitting there on that park bench like a madwoman. People stared. I didn't care. I wasn't a homeless old woman. I was the owner of everything that had crushed me. At the bottom of the letter was a name and number. Roger. My hands shook as I found a working payphone and dialed. When I said my name, the voice on the other end went silent. "Mrs. Salazar," he finally said. "We've been trying to find you for months." 30 minutes later, a black car pulled up beside the park. The driver stepped out, opened the door, and said politely, "Mrs. Salazar, we're here to take you home." By the next morning, I would step into a world of power. I never knew I had quietly begin a plan that would force my son to pay the full price of his betrayal. The law office didn't feel real. Glass walls, soft carpets, people who spoke calmly, as if life had never crushed them before. I sat in a leather chair while the lawyer, Roger, explained numbers that sounded impossible. 13 properties, apartment buildings, commercial spaces, investment accounts, cash Henry had quietly saved for decades. $10 million. I stared at the documents, my hands no longer shaking from hunger but from disbelief. Just days earlier, I had been sleeping on a park bench. Now I was being told I owned the city that had ignored me. Roger arranged everything quickly. A luxury hotel, clean clothes, a bank card with more money than I had ever held. When I stood alone in the hotel suite that night, surrounded by soft lights and silence, I understood something important. Power doesn't announce itself, it waits. The next morning, I made my first decision. "I don't want anyone to know I own the properties," I told Roger. "Not yet." He nodded. "We can create a company. Everything will be handled through it." We named it Mendoza Enterprises. I spent days learning reading contracts, studying rent rolls, understanding how everything worked. Henry had built an empire quietly. I would manage it carefully. Then we came to Magnolia Street. Roger hesitated. "Your son and his wife live there under a reduced rent agreement. They pay far below market value." "How much?" I asked. $400. I closed my eyes. $400. And he threw me out with 200. "Raise it to market price," I said calmly. Roger looked at me. "That will triple their rent. Then they'll pay what everyone else pays." The notice went out polite, legal, firm. 30 days to adjust to the new rate or vacate. The phone calls started immediately. "Mr. Salazar has called multiple times. Roger told me he's demanding to speak with the owner. Tell him the owner is unavailable." Days passed, then weeks. Roger updated me quietly. "They're struggling. Credit cards, loans. The new rent is breaking them." Good. But I wasn't finished. Don's biggest client rented office space in one of my commercial buildings. The contract was outdated, far below market value. "Adjust it," I said. "Bring it to fair pricing." Within weeks, the company cut expenses. One of the first contracts they canceled was Dawn's. She lost her job. Still, I said nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't revenge. It was balance. Then Roger called one afternoon, his tone serious. "Mrs. Salazar, your son is 2 months behind on rent. Under policy, eviction is now an option." I looked out the hotel window at the city skyline. "Start the process," I said. "By the book." What my son didn't know was that the eviction notice on his door would lead him straight into a courtroom, where the truth about who owned his life was finally going to be revealed. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold coffee. I arrived early and sat on the back bench, dressed in a tailored gray suit, my hair neatly pulled back. No one would recognize me, not as the woman who once cooked soup in that kitchen, not as the mother who had been ignored. I was just another observer. Robert walked in 15 minutes later. He looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, dark circles under his eyes. Dawn followed him, perfectly styled, heels clicking sharply against the floor. She looked angry, not scared. Their lawyer whispered urgently to them, flipping through papers that wouldn't save them. Roger entered next, calm, confident, prepared. He didn't look in my direction. He didn't need to. The judge took her seat, firm and efficient. Mendoza Enterprises versus Robert Salazar, the clerk announced. Robert's lawyer argued first. He spoke about sudden rent increases, about family arrangements, about unfair treatment. His voice lacked conviction. Even he knew it. Roger stood and spoke clearly, methodically. He presented contracts, notices, payment records. Everything was legal. Everything was clean. The defendant has failed to pay rent. Under the updated terms, for 2 consecutive months, Roger concluded. This establishes a pattern of no. The judge turned to Robert. Mr. Salazar, do you currently have the outstanding rent? Robert swallowed. No, Your Honor. The gavel came down. You have 10 days to vacate the property. Dawn exploded. This is ridiculous. You can't do this to us. The judge didn't even look at her. Next case. That was it. 20 minutes. Years of arrogance undone. I watched as Dawn stormed out first, furious, embarrassed. Robert followed slowly, his head down, defeated. He passed right by me without noticing. For the first time, I felt nothing. No joy, no revenge. Just closure. Later that afternoon, Roger met me at a cafe. It went exactly as expected. He said gently, I know. There's something else, he added, sliding a letter across the table. It was from a tenant, a single mother, asking if her rent increase could be staggered. She attached pay stubs, references, receipts. I read it carefully. Approve her request, I said. She's trying. Roger smiled. You're fair. I'm just not cruel, I replied. That evening, Roger called again. Your son paid the overdue rent using a high-interest loan, he said, but he's already behind again. I closed my eyes. Proceed with eviction, I said quietly. No exceptions. 2 days later, my son begged for a meeting, desperate to face the mysterious owner who destroyed his life, never imagining he was about to come face to face with his mother. Roger scheduled the meeting for the next afternoon. Robert had begged to speak with the property owner. Frantic, convinced that if he could just explain, everything might change. I agreed on one condition. The meeting would be at the law office. And it would be brief. When Robert walked into the office, he stopped so suddenly the door almost hit the wall behind him. Mom. His voice cracked. I was seated behind the desk. Composed, dressed in a charcoal suit. Not the woman he had ignored on the kitchen floor. Not the mother he threw out with $200. Sit down, Robert, I said evenly. He didn't. He just stared. You're the owner, he whispered. Yes, I replied. I always was. The color drained from his face. He stumbled into the chair like his legs had forgotten how to work. You let this happen, he asked. You let me lose everything. I leaned forward. No, you let it happen. I simply stopped protecting you from the consequences. His hands shook. I didn't know. If I had known. If you had known I had money, I interrupted softly. Would you have treated me differently? He couldn't answer. The silence told me everything. I slept on a park bench, I continued. I searched trash bins for food. I waited in soup lines. And not once did you check if I was alive. Tears rolled down his face. I was weak, he said. I chose comfort. I chose silence. I chose my wife over my mother. Yes, I said. You did. He finally looked up. Is this revenge? I shook my head. No, this is truth. And truth is expensive. Robert told me everything then. Dawn had left. His job was gone. Debts were piling up. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to hide behind. I'm going to be evicted, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. And you're going to survive it. He flinched. You're not going to help me. I'm not going to save you, I corrected. There's a difference. He nodded slowly, understanding at last. Before leaving, he turned back. Will you ever forgive me? I paused. That depends on what you become next, not on what you say today. He left without arguing. Weeks passed. Robert moved into a small studio, took a night job, started therapy. For the first time, he was living without shortcuts. One morning, my phone rang. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. I just wanted you to know. I'm trying. I looked out at my garden, the roses blooming, the sunlight warm on my face. That's all I ever wanted, I said. And for the first time in a very long time, I meant it. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people remember. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to stand up for yourself.